Hi, everyone. Good morning. My name
Good
is
morning.
Adriana. Hi, Elizabeth. Good morning. I'm Adriana Linares. I'm the host of LawTech Connect. Thanks for joining us today. And my guest today, which I'm super excited to talk about, such an interesting area of law that I had, as usual, till I meet a lawyer who does something very cool, had never thought that there was a niche like this one. So, hi, Elizabeth. Thanks for getting up early along with me today because I'm in LA. And where are you located?
I am right now in Spokane, Washington, which is where I'm based, but I have a nationwide practice.
And are you, I think I noticed on your website a New York address too. Are you licensed in multiple states or are you just work in a nationwide practice?
I have a nationwide practice, and depending upon the scope of my work, I can be admitted in another jurisdiction, pro hoc vice. It's a
Oh,
legal term that basically means that if you file a form, if you have an attorney who's licensed to practice in a given jurisdiction to sponsor you, and you pay a fee, then you can enter a formal court appearance for the purposes of that one case and that one case only.
and so let's get to the heart of this matter, which is what type of practice do you have? And then I am going to back up and ask you some backup questions, but just to get the suspense out of the air.
All right, thank you. I'm a criminal defense lawyer, but I specialize in representing people with mental disabilities. And mental disabilities is a global term, which means mental illness, things like schizophrenia, bipolar disorder, major depression, as well as intellectual and developmental disabilities like fetal alcohol spectrum disorder and autism spectrum disorders.
That is amazing. And tell me about your background. How did you get to this point where you developed this niche, this special area of law?
I fell into it, Adrian. I was a criminal
Yeah,
defense lawyer,
happens a lot.
and I had my first client who had an intellectual or developmental disability, what we used to call mental retardation. And I worked very closely with him and his family and his caseworker, and we were able to arrive at a resolution which was very sensible.
Hmm.
And
For
I
someone
enjoy,
with this,
pardon me?
I said, very sensible for someone with this problem or these problems, which is
Exactly,
very
exactly.
pleasing to hear.
Well, we tried to fashion a sentence that made sense not only for him to get him the help that he needed
Mm.
and would prevent him from reoffending, but also would protect the community. So, in any
Imagine.
event, his caseworker started recommending me to other families who had a loved one in that situation.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like any practice, like any business. Word of mouth travels, you start circulating your business card, and next thing you know, that's a significant portion of your business. And then I had my first client who had what we call a co-occurring disorder, meaning not only an intellectual disability, but a mental illness. So I started schooling myself
Oh,
on mental illnesses, and gradually this became a real focus of my practice. Other attorneys started reaching out to me for guidance. Even judges started relying on me for
wow.
guidance. So it grew into something that's not only very successful, but something that means a good deal to me. It's my mission, as it were.
I love it. And very satisfying work. And my goal here on Law Tech Connect has been to talk to lawyers to inspire other lawyers and new lawyers and burgeoning lawyers to find an area of law that they can be passionate about and really want to get up and go to work. I've worked in big law and mini law, as I jokingly call it, micro law to big law. And it saddens me to meet really good humans that don't like their jobs. And a lot of times that's the case with lawyers who haven't really, dug in and found that thing that they really love doing. So in law school, yeah, go ahead.
Well, I was going to say the question that everyone asks criminal defense lawyers is, how can you defend those people? How can you defend someone who's guilty? And the fact of
Sure.
the matter is, when you're representing people with mental disabilities, by and large, they have a very different kind of guilt, a very different kind of
Huh.
culpability. They're not a stone hard calculating criminal like you might expect. They may not understand why they did what they did.
Oh.
They may be powerless to prevent doing what they did, or they may be conned by their so-called friends into
Mm-hmm.
committing the crime that they're accused of. So it's a very, very different type of criminal defense practice that I have. And I spoke earlier about having a mission. What's so frightening about this country, Adrian, is that we lock people up with mental disabilities for basically manifesting the symptoms of
Mm.
their sickness, when if in fact these people had the treatment and the resources they needed in the community, they wouldn't be ensnared in the criminal justice system.
It's a topic we hear often about, and it's really sad. So I'm glad we have people like you to help them. Tell me, in law school, you were not trained in psychology or mental illness. So as you developed this practice and really got into it, how did you train yourself? Did you take courses? Did you read books? Is it the school of hard knocks like so many of us go to?
Well, I was very lucky. I worked with a number of mental health experts who took the time to act as a resource
Hmm.
and answered all my questions, were very tolerant, suggested a different additional readings.
Hmm.
And it's the old adage, you just do the work.
Yeah.
So I rolled up my sleeves and I worked every single case to the best of my ability. And I tell many people, I'm not the brightest star out there in the legal constellation, but I work hard and I'm also good to my clients and their families. And as you know, Adriana, one of the major reasons for grievances against attorneys is the failure to communicate.
Sure. Yep.
And I pride myself in staying in touch with my clients and their families. And I've also found during the course of my practice that the families are often the best resources out there, because chances are they have been dealing with their loved one's disability
Hmm.
for years, if not decades. And they can talk about what their childhood was
Right.
like, what they were like when they first started manifesting the signs of their mental disability, if they've taken their loved one to doctors or what have you over the years. They're the ones who have kept the records. So it's time well spent on my part.
In a strange way, it sounds like oftentimes the family is the evidence. They've got the story and the history and are able to help
Exactly.
support your case.
Exactly. And I tell people somewhat tongue in cheek, mothers are the best custodians of records there are,
Sure, of course.
because if they've been sending someone to a doctor from the time he or she was a kid, they've saved every single piece of paper. They've saved every single report. And if perchance they haven't saved that, they can direct you in the right direction.
That's really, really just amazing. And I imagine that, you said that communicating and probably overly communicating is part of your ethos. And of course, I, I use the 3 or 4 most administrative based claims against lawyers to push technology. So failure to communicate, lost files, um, missed deadlines, right? So for me, I'm very familiar with those because I typically use them as a way to say, hey, these are things that there's technology that can help you with these administrative issues.
Sure,
Um,
sure.
so, so for you, it just sounds like you're the lifeline for this family. And I realize that for a lot of lawyers, they are the lifeline. But in this case, with this added layer of complexity to your cases and your clients, it's critical.
Well, and one of the reasons why I'm able to communicate with my clients and their families is I don't have, if you will, a volume practice.
Sure.
I have a few cases that mean a good deal to me that I can really, really work. And some of them take years and years and years to resolve.
Hmm.
For instance, if it's a post-conviction case, that, as you know from reading the headlines of exonerations, those cases can take years, if not decades. So I tell my clients, I tell my families, I know it's difficult for you, but please, please be patient. It takes time to do a good and thorough job. And unfortunately, in the legal system, all too many times, you don't get a second chance.
Mm. When you get a case and decide to take it, do you, and I imagine there's, well, I don't imagine, I know there are varying and probably hundreds of types of mental and intellectual disabilities. So when someone comes in and you decide to take a case and it's a condition you have not dealt with before, do you just, is this what you mean when you say you go to work, you dive in and you figure out what are the issues or the causes or the science or the psychology behind this particular, I don't want to call it an illness. Would I call it an illness, a
You
condition?
could, you could. It,
Okay.
I'll give the lawyer answer. It
It
all
depends.
depends. Um, Even if it's a diagnosis that I have encountered before,
Hmm.
the fact of the matter is every single person's presentation of symptoms is different. For instance,
Mm.
very, very often in the context of autism spectrum disorder, you hear people say, if you've met one person with autism, you've met one person with autism. Well, you can say the same about bipolar disorder or post-traumatic stress disorder or traumatic brain injury. Um, there are some common themes. There are
Mm.
even some common stories, but
Interesting.
every single person, by virtue of the fact that they've led different lives, they have different families, they've come from different backgrounds, has a unique twist. And I'm always alert to that. And it's that unique twist, that plot twist, if you will,
Yeah.
that that keeps it interesting and keeps me on my toes.
And I love that. I think that's part of having a passion and then being able to feed it is that diversity in having that. You've written some books
I
and
have. Thank you for
some,
asking.
sure. Well,
And
everyone likes to say, well, she wrote the book. So I think from a marketing perspective, and tell me why you wrote the books and do you give them to your clients? Is it a marketing tool? Because obviously that's brilliant.
well, a couple things. First of all, I started out life wanting to be an English professor. And I was in a graduate program in English at the University of Chicago, and I did a U-turn and I went to law school. And I remember as I was exiting graduate school, there was a professor of American literature who said, right now you feel as if you're a lawyer adrift in a liberal arts school. But I can promise you, in a few years, you will feel as if you are a humanist adrift in the legal profession. And I never really felt
Wow.
I never really felt adrift. But in law school, I always took seminar classes because they that would let me write papers. And I've always loved reading and writing. And as I started specializing in representing people with mental disabilities, I realized that as I was getting into this, there weren't all the sources in one place that I needed. So I tell people I wrote the book that I wish I would have had when I started practicing this area of law. So this is my first book, Representing People with Mental Disabilities, a practical guide for criminal defense lawyers, published by the American Bar Association. And last year or earlier this year, this book came out, Representing People with Autism Spectrum Disorders, a practical guide for criminal defense lawyers. And if you see the spines of these two books, they're very narrow as far as law books go. And that's the intent. And they also have bright covers, so you can see it on a desk or on a bookshelf. And I want busy attorneys to be able to open the book and read in one sitting about key concepts like competency or criminal responsibility or mitigation or neuroscience or co-occurring disorders in people with autism spectrum. And the chapters are relatively brief, approximately 5,000 words. And the authors of each chapter were sternly admonished not to use a lot of footnotes or citations. And thank you very much to write in English. So lawyers without heavy medical and psychiatry and psychological backgrounds could readily understand them.
I love that you found it helpful for yourself, but also important to educate other lawyers and help your peers. I talk about that a lot when I interview lawyers. I'm like, why do you always give back? Why do you train? Why do you teach? Why do you volunteer so much? And I think that's another part of being a fulfilled lawyer, is being able to give back to the community. You also...
And I was going to say, as you know, if you're forced to delve into a topic and then write about it or present about it, you end up learning it all the more deeply. It enhances your own learning process. You may understand the concept, but being able to articulate it to someone else is another layer of the learning process.
Well, sure. Do you find, I'm not sure how to ask this question, but I'm thinking about a possibly related story that I could present in order to ask the question, which is, a while ago, I did, I was part of a hackathon. And one of the apps that one of the teams was developing was an app for lawyers to help them identify domestic violence or just domestic issues in a separate area of law. So maybe, and here's an example I can remember hearing about. There was a woman that was divorcing her husband, and they were fighting over a farm. And somehow, of course, she was keeping all this domestic abuse to herself for reasons that people do that. And the lawyer started to sort of kind of get a glimmer and think, oh, so I need to, so that person, that lawyer, ended up becoming a trainer for other lawyers and recognizing these layers of complexity in the case. So I wonder, do lawyers encounter people with mental or intellectual disabilities in their cases, and they don't even recognize it? They don't know.
Bingo.
So they just attack the case like any other, and that doesn't even come across their minds. And I don't mean to insult anyone. I'm just saying,
no. You're absolutely right. And again, it depends upon the diagnosis. So if for instance, the court appoints you to represent someone, or you're retained on a case, and the family or the client says right away, John has bipolar disorder or Mary suffers from postpartum depression, then it's easy. Sure. But if you meet a client you need to listen to your instincts.
Mm-hmm.
Is there something off? Or in the case of the attorney about whom you earlier spoke, is there something that that client is masking or camouflaging? So for instance, if you have someone with an intellectual disability, they may have spent their entire life trying to mask that disability because they don't want people making fun of them like they might
Right.
have done when they were kids. They
Sure.
don't want to be called stupid or retard or something like that.
Yeah.
The same holds true for people with mental illness. They don't want to be called
Of
crazy
course.
or
Oh.
stigmatized. So yeah. So attorneys need to listen. And that's so difficult for us because we're trained and we're rewarded for talking. But
Tell me about
there's
it.
a
I got one right here.
but there's a reason why we have two ears and only one mouth. We need to listen twice as much as we speak.
You are also interestingly, so I want to turn a little bit toward you, which is how you keep your balance and your focus and your own mental stability, because I'm sure cases like this can be really emotional, whether you want them to be or not. You're a certified yoga instructor.
I I am, yes. I have my yoga certification,
Hmm.
and I've been lucky enough to take yoga workshops all over the world. In fact, I was on a yoga and meditation retreat in India uh, during the pandemic, and I returned to the United States the first week in March.
Oh my gosh.
And I'm
Pandemonium pandemic time.
Yeah, and looking back on it, the timing was really fortuitous because if ever you need to build internal peace, it's during a global pandemic. So I have a good store, knock on wood, of inner peace to get me through this, whenever it all may end. But I don't teach yoga. I continually pursued classes and workshops
Sure.
in order to deepen my practice. And I do it not only for the physical benefits, but for the emotional benefits.
And I think that's an important thing to remind lawyers that, you know, you just have to do is keep your mental health and your spirit high, especially in cases and areas of law like this, which are, like I said, probably very emotional.
Well, and it's funny because I didn't start yoga for the benefits I described.
Sure.
I started for a very superficial reason, to improve my golf game. And because I had heard
Reason.
that it was important for increasing your trunk strength, and it did, but I fell in love with it. And going back to your point about my practice, as you know, Adriana, the legal profession has a disproportionately high level of burnout and
Yes.
substance abuse. And we
Yes.
as a profession don't always take care of ourselves. We're taking care of
True.
our clients, we're taking care of our cases, but not ourselves. And from a practical standpoint, if we're not taking care of ourselves, then we can become vulnerable to making bad decisions or just not as being as effective as we might on a given case. And that hurts our clients. That hurts the
Yeah.
system.
Before I let you go, tell me a little bit about your actual practice. Are you a solo? Do you have an assistant? Do you have offices? Just give me the infrastructure of how you do your thing.
I do my thing largely by myself. I'm a sole practitioner.
Hmm.
And when I get a case in another jurisdiction, I affiliate with another attorney or attorneys, and it gives me the best of all possible worlds.
Sure.
And I'm always careful about the other attorneys I associate with. although a couple times I've been surprised. And I always have been able to find attorneys who know their way around that jurisdiction, who
Excellent.
are good at what they do and enjoyable to work with. And hopefully we make up a good team for our client.
I think that's awesome. And you mentioned earlier, so I just want to confirm, most of your work just comes from word of mouth because you've developed this specialty, this area, and people say,
It-
hey, there's a lady out in Spokane or Spokane.
Spokane, like can of
Spokane.
soup. Spokane.
Sorry. There's a
And,
lady out
and,
in Spokane.
and sometimes they don't even know where I'm from. They just know I exist.
Yeah.
And as you know, how people find attorneys runs the gamut. I had a call from the Midwest this weekend from an attorney who read a blog posting I wrote in 2018.
Good old Google.
Some people Google me and they find my book. Some people met me at a cocktail party 10 years ago.
Yep.
And then all of a sudden their loved one, whom they may have hidden, gets in trouble with the law. Some people find me through a hashtag on Twitter. It all depends. So
Yeah. You got to put yourself out there.
Yeah, and getting back to social media, one thing tends to reinforce the other. So
Sure.
it doesn't do you any good to have a great blog posting unless you've got a good website that people can go to.
So speaking of all those platforms, tell everyone how they can learn more about you, find, friend, or follow you before I let you go.
Oh, thank you. My website is elizabethkelleylaw.com. That's one word. And Elizabeth with a Z. Kelley is spelled Kelley. Or you can follow me on Twitter at Mental Health ESQ.
I love it. That's really
And
great.
I'm also on LinkedIn.
And that's how you found me.
Yes, exactly.
So there's something to be said about LinkedIn. Yeah, I had put a post out there saying, hey, everyone, I've got this new show. I'm interested in talking to lawyers with very niche practices. And you reached out and I appreciate that. So thank you so much for reaching out. And thank you so much for getting up so early with me this morning and talking to us.
I get up at about 5 o'clock anyway. So this is fine.
Yeah, I do too.
I'm fully
so
caffeinated.
I appreciate it. Same. Well, thank you so much, Elizabeth. I hope to stay in touch and learn more about you as you continue your great success. It's really awesome. Thank you very much for joining me today.
Well, this was fun. Thank you. Bye-bye.
I'm glad. Bye now.